Welcome to this week's Wednesday webinar. For those of you who don't know us, or just to remind you, Bats Without Borders is a small NGO working towards bat conservation through research, education, and capacity building across Southern Africa. Bat Conservation Africa is a network across mainland Africa and the surrounding islands. And GBATnet is an exciting new network of networks, connecting networks and people globally. And if you don't already, I encourage you to follow these organizations on social media to keep up to date and get involved in their work. For today's webinar, we had a double act to cover topics on bat surveying techniques. Unfortunately, one of our speakers, Ollie Aylen, can't join us live today, but he has sent a link to a video, a short video where he describes his research, and will post a link to this so you can watch it. But I am delighted to welcome Natalia Revilla Martin, who will be talking about monitoring cave dwelling bats using acoustics with new approaches. I'll leave it to Natalia to introduce herself. Enjoy the webinar. Then if you want to start sharing your screen so you can give your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hello, Elisa, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I hope you hear and understand me well. Is my audio fine? Elisa, can you tell me? Yes? Okay, so I'm Natalia Revilla. I'm a master's student in Barcelona, the University of Barcelona, and I've done my master thesis at the Adrià López-Baucells lab in Barcelona as well. So I'm going to present you what we've been doing. So let's share the screen. Okay. So I'm going to present you this work that we've been carrying out at the Museum of Natural Sciences of Granollers. So here we propose a new approach to monitor cave dwelling bats using bioacoustics. Our main objective with this work was to develop a method that was simple, non-invasive, and low cost, as we wanted it to be useful for monitoring programs, long-term monitoring programs, and for citizen science projects. So, as you probably know, caves are essential for bat conservation. Caves, mines, and other underground cavities are used by bats to all during the year cycle to roost, to hibernate, to mate. But despite their importance, they're usually overlooked in underground in conservation plans. So we believe that improving our knowledge on bat occupation, so when and where bats are, could help to create better sorry for my English. So to develop better management programs, right? So, and this was the main boost of our study. So let's first take a look at the existing counting methods to combat in underground roosts. So one of the most common are visual counts. This is entering in the roost during the day and just counting bats. So this can be very simple, but also really tricky, depending on the characteristics of the cave, on the time of the year, and on the size of the colony. So during the warm season, when bats are active even during the day, it's more common to combat during emergence. So as you see in the video, it is relatively easy to count when colonies are small, but it becomes really difficult when colonies are bigger. So luckily in the last years, new technologies came to the rescue, and there are some really cool methods such as this thermal imaging or LiDAR scanner that allow to count bats really accurately and also in a really automated way. The problem is that these really cool methods are usually over the budget of many research groups. So then it comes bioacoustics. So acoustic methods, and specifically passive acoustic techniques, are widely used in bat research. The price also used to be a limitation, but in the last years, new devices have been launched, such as the really known audio moth, that have helped to overpass this problem. So passive acoustic monitoring is used to answer questions about species richness or about relative abundance of bats, but it hasn't been used to estimate absolute abundance of animals, right? Because given the impossibility of identifying individual bats only from acoustics. And this was our point. So we thought that maybe under the specific conditions of underground roost, it could be possible to estimate bat abundance from acoustic activity. This could be because in underground roosts, bats are flying unidirectionally. That is, they go out or in. So this was our main objective, to develop this method that allows to convert acoustic activity to bat abundance. And we have some specific objectives. So first, we wanted to compare visual counts of the emergence versus counts from infrared video recordings. Secondly, we wanted to develop these regressions that allow to relate acoustic activity and bat abundance. We wanted to compare these regressions when they were site-specific, that is, one regression per site, versus a global regression, that is, a regression that could be used in different caves. We also wanted to examine which could be the best detector position. And finally, we did a small pilot testing of the method. So as a study species, we chose Minopterus reversi, which is a cave-dwelling species with a really wide distribution. And it is a migrating species. So it migrates from its summer roost to its winter roosts. And we chose 5 locations, 5 transitory colonies of this species that we previously knew. And we went there 5 times, so 5 times to each site during the spring migratory season of 2019. Once there, we counted bats visually emerging from the roost at dusk, and we recorded this emergence with an infrared camera to count them later in these videos. And we also placed 5 audio morph recorders. That is, we placed 1 at the entrance, 2 inside the cave at 2 and 10 meters away from the entrance, and 2 out of the cave, 2 and 10 meters away from the entrance, all of them looking to the interior of the cavity. Once we got all our data, we started with the acoustic analysis. So as you may know, there is no consensus about the definition of bat pass, which could be the measure for acoustic activity. So after some trials, we decided to define bat pass as a 1-second long file in which at least 1 call from the study species is detected. Therefore, we cut our audio files in chunks of 1 second using the software Kaleidoscope.
The next thing I wanted to mention was the total.
Then we used Tadarida, which is a software that automatically classifies and labels European bats to classify our audio files. And we chose those that were labeled as Minopterus reversi or Pipistrellus pygmaeus. Pipistrellus pygmaeus is a species that has a really similar call than Minopterus reversi, but does not roost in the surveyed cavities. Okay, once we got this, we wanted to check if Tadarida was doing this automatic classification right. So we followed a protocol that was created by Barret et al. In 2019 is published. So what we did was to take a representative subset of our data and classify them manually. And then we model the success probability of the automatic classification of Tadarida as a function of the confidence score. This confidence score is a parameter that Tadarida gives you, saying you how good that it thinks that the classification is. And we found that when the confidence score was equal or higher than 0.4, the success probability of Tadarida was of 90%. And so then we dismiss all the bad passes with a confidence score lower than 0.4. Okay, so once we got this, just to finish, we wanted to establish and start and an endpoint of the emergence. So the audio modes were recording for 2 hours. And as we were there in the field, could identify when the start and so we could identify the start at the end of the emergence, but that wouldn't happen if the detectors are just left alone in the field. So we needed to establish this start and end point. So we did this with R, with a function that identifies the knee points of a curve. You can see it here. So this is the curve of the number of accumulated bad passes in a night. And we chose the part you see in gray. So that way we dismiss the first part of the night when some bats are usually coming out and in, and the last part when some bats are coming back to the cavity. So going to the results, we found no significant differences between the visual counts of the emergence and the counts from the infrared video recordings. So it's important to note that our colonies were up to 1,500 Miniopterus habersi, so they were small or medium-sized colonies, and that the cavities had a good visibility, and then the counter, the great Ivana Budinski, I think she's here now, she was experienced. Well, anyway, we assume that our video counts were more accurate than the visual counts and were the ones that used for our further analysis. So coming to these regressions, we first tried with a global one, so including all our data points, over 25 data points. But we found, as you see here on the graph, that the adjustment was not really good, especially on the right part of the graph, due to overdispersion of the data. So we tried with site-specific regressions and found much better results. So as you see, in some caves, this R-square, the explanatory power, is around 0.4, even though at some others, it is only 0.47. Okay, so to see whether there was actually a difference between the site-specific regressions and the global regressions, we did an ANOVA on the residuals of these two groups and found significant difference. So we concluded that site-specific regressions were actually better than the global one. Well, it could have been really cool to find a global regression that could be applied to several caves. But, well, I believe it's easy to understand that each cave has its own characteristics that, that make this a little bit difficult. Probably the behavior of bats vary, and also the quality of the recordings. So one regression, it is needed for every cave. Okay, about the detector position, we found that the entrance was the best place to leave to fix these audio mods. As you see in the graph, the explanatory power of the regressions created from data from the entrance were much better than, or at least more reliable. So it was higher in most of the cases than the ones from other positions. So we were actually expecting this. So the recorders that are inside are probably recording echoes from the echolocation calls, or maybe bats making circles inside the cavity. And then the detectors that are outside are probably recording bats that were just flying in the vicinity but were not roosting at the cavity. So, and finally coming to our pilot testing. So we left one audio moth at one of our caves during the whole migratory season. So from the beginning of May until the beginning of July. And here you can see the results of the estimations. So we see several things here. We see a blue line, which are the acoustic estimations. Red points, which are our counts, our visual counts from the videos, and a gray shade, which are the counts that were carried out at the museum the previous year. So these counts were happening every 15 days on 2018. Okay, so first, the first thing we see is that with the estimations, we found great variations on bat number. We were expecting this, as these are migratory caves, which means that bats arrive, stay there for a couple of days, and they leave. But we don't know if these fluctuations are as big as we see here on the graph. Second, we see that the tendency is similar with the estimations and with the counts from the previous year. So during the month of April, bat number was smaller, and it starts to rise during the month of May. And then at the end of June, the number of bats reduces, and bats finally leave the cave at the end of the June, almost on the same day that was detected during the previous year. So about the limitations of this. First, it is really important to note that these are estimations. So we believe that these estimations could improve if instead of 5 surveys as we did, you had 6 or 7 or 8. So we wanted to do some more, but then coronavirus came, and well, it was not possible. Well, we also ask ourselves whether external factors could influence both bat behavior and recording quality, external factors like weather. So this could be a limitation of the method depending on the time of the year, if the weather changes, yeah, with the seasons. Then multiple entrances could be a problem. Well, this is a problem when you're trying to count bats in any way, like visual counts are also difficult if you have multiple entrances. But of course, this could also be an issue with this method. And well, and most importantly, is like, okay, what happens when my colonies are bigger than 1,500 individuals? So we didn't have the opportunity to check it. I believe that what could happen is that the relationship between bat passes and number of bats probably changes. So instead of having a linear regression, as you could see before, probably the number of bats, also the bats coming out probably overlaps. So when you have many bats coming out, so that the relationship probably varies, and you cannot use a linear regression but yeah, some other distribution, right? So about this, there's a really interesting study that was the one that we found that used acoustics to estimate colony sizes. It is this one by Laura Kloepper that was published in 2016. And well, the colonies here were much bigger. So they were surveying colonies of Tadarida brasiliensis, which were from 700,000 animals to 900,000, so really much bigger than ours. And to estimate bat abundance, they were using acoustic parameters, which is a really interesting approach. So they were using the root mean square pressure, peak-to-peak pressure, and total energy, and they found correlations. But the limitation of this is that they found correlations with between the number of bats and these acoustic parameters when there were more than 10 bats per second, 10 bats per second coming out of the cave. So this wouldn't be our case here in Spain, probably, as we don't have these huge colonies. And well, as conclusions, first, I wanted to highlight that it is possible to estimate colony size of this species of Niltesus reversi using bioacoustics when colonies are, at least when colonies are smaller than 1,500 individuals. Second, that visual counts can be as accurate as infrared video recordings if the counter is experienced. About this method, it is important that regressions should be site specific. So at least for us, global regressions didn't work. The detector should be ideally placed at the entrance, but you have to consider the risk of it being damaged or stolen, which unlikely sometimes happen. And finally, just as a final conclusion, that this method that now I'm presenting to you, it's low cost, it's non-invasive and simple, and that this approach could be easily implemented in long-term monitoring programs, as well as in citizen science projects. So yeah, of course, this work was not only mine, but it is the work of a whole team at the Museum of Natural Sciences of Granollers. I especially wanted to acknowledge the work of Ivana Budinski and Adrià López-Baucells, and of course also Xavier Puig and Carlos Flaquer. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you managed to understand me, and if not, please just ask me. I'm really open to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Natalia. That was an excellent presentation, really interesting to see your results, and kind of really encouraging to see good correlations between the different methods, the visual counts and the infrared and the acoustic methods as well. We have had a few questions in the chat. I'll start with Rachel's questions, who asked whether or not you could please explain a bit more about how you use LiDAR.
Okay. Okay, I'm afraid I don't know much about this method. I was just reading a paper by AFME. And well, as if I understood it well, if not, please someone correct me. It's kind of a laser that allows you to enter in. So you enter the cave, and with this laser, you can detect where bats are roosting, so that you can count them individually with a software that they also developed. And yeah, what I know about this is that unlikely the equipment is a little bit expensive, as I told you. So yeah, we couldn't try.
Yeah. Another question about whether you've compared the quality of audio mods with other detectors.
So yeah, in the beginning, when we started using audio mods, we were a little bit afraid because we were looking at the audio files and we were like, okay, this is not normal. Like this is not detecting what we were expecting. But so we believe that the detection is a little bit lower. So you could detect more things with an SM4 than with audio mod. But well, you also need to consider that the prices is much lower, right?
Yeah. I had a question of my own about, so you said the kind of differences between the site-specific and the global regressions, that I was wondering what this means in terms of how widely applicable this could be to kind of scale it up, this kind of surveying, to more and more sites rather than having to kind of gather lots of information about specific sites or individual sites.
So yeah, this is tricky. Well, our caves were pretty different one to another. So we were surveying both tunnels and mines and natural caves. So also the characteristics of the cave were really different. So this might be a cause of why a global regression didn't work. But well, that's what we found. So yeah, for the moment, if you wanted to apply this, you would need to create a single regression for each cave that you wanted to survey.
Great.
Anyway, we believe that with this you reduce a lot the survey effort. So we went there 5 times, maybe 7 or 8 could be optimal. But with that, you could estimate the colony size, right? So you wouldn't need to be going there every 15 days to do the survey. Yeah.
We have a comment from Rachel saying, in caves with multiple species, I guess there's also confusion with identifying species using thermal imaging of similar size species. If species have distinct echolocation calls, this could be a better method, but also difficult if calls are difficult to distinguish. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, real true. So we were lucky, like at least in Europe, we are lucky about it, and it's pretty. In general, it's possible to distinguish between species. So in our caves, we had Miniopterus reversi, and we also have some Rhinolophus species. But well, as all the echolocation calls and also the flying, so when they fly, they look different. We could identify them both visually and with the echolocation calls. But yeah, that could be tricky with meiotis, for example.
Yeah. I guess that's one of the advantages of having using more than one technique.
Yeah, at the same time. Yeah.
We have a question from Hernani. And do you think you would also be able to use this technique in places where there are a lot of echoes from the echolocating bats emerging from the cave, such as in highly cluttered environments?
So at one of our caves, we found, so at one of our caves, the interior of the cave was pretty big, and bats were making circles inside. So the behavior of them was pretty different to other caves when bats just went out really fast. And the point is that as you are creating site-specific regressions, these regressions adapt to the characteristics of that cave. So I don't know, but I believe that if in that specific cave you have a lot of echoes and you have all your data points have these echoes, this is going to be like integrated in the regression. And I don't know, I believe it could be it could be done as well.
Great. If anyone else has any other questions, please pop them in the chat. Otherwise, just like to thank you, Natalia, again for a really, really interesting talk. Sorry, I'll just read another comment here from Ida, who says, I have used thermal cameras in caves with several species and tried to identify them is very difficult, not only for the similar size species, but also because bats emerge at height. So yeah, is that something you have considered?
Yeah, well, yeah, as I told you, luckily we only had Rhinolophus and Miniopterus, and we had some big Myotis. And well, for us, it was possible, but of course it's Europe, and which is much less diverse than other parts of the world.
Yeah, so you think maybe that means this technique might be better suited to some areas than others, depending on the type of caves and the bat assemblages that they have.
Definitely.
Great. Well, it's only sorry, just more questions coming in. Thanks, Natalia. Really interesting chat. Yes, it can be difficult if you have a mixed species colony to separate species apart using acoustics. So yeah, I guess you've sort of commented on that already.
Yeah. In fact, we included soprano pipistrelles calls in our samples. So we selected them as if they were Miniopterus, because in our case they were known soprano pipistrelles. So yeah, it can be really tricky, of course. And yeah, a combination of methods, it's probably the best option always.
Fantastic. Well, once again, thank you very much for your talk. I apologize again from the technical problems at the beginning and the delayed start of this webinar. I hope you've all enjoyed a really interesting talk, learning more about different very novel bat surveying techniques. If you have any more questions, maybe you can keep popping them in the chat and we can get them to Natalia and to Ollie, who unfortunately couldn't join us live today, but maybe we can try and get back to you if you keep your questions coming. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. It's almost 2 o'clock, so I think we'll bring this webinar to a close, but we hope you can join us for the next webinars that we have lined up for the rest of the year. Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks very much, Natalia, again for joining us as a speaker. Bat lures and their use for surveying bats.
My name is Ollie Hayland, and for my master's research at the University of Otago in New Zealand, I was lucky enough to go to Brunei Darussalam in Borneo to study the bat semester. And when I arrived, I was given the opportunity to use acoustic bat alert, which actually became a pretty major component of my thesis research. But why was I interested in it? What did I have to achieve in my research? And first of all, what is an acoustic bat alert? Simplistically, bat alerts are devices capable of playing high-frequency sound, in this case, bat calls. The idea stems from research in the 80s and 90s, where researchers noticed that bats were attracted to the sound, and first suggested that they could potentially be used to increase capture rates. Now, this has been observed and applied in other taxa, such as amphibians, birds, and recently even fish communities. So why did I become so interested? Well, I love new tech and gadgets, and the idea of attracting bats to me seemed too good to be true. But after any new method, I consulted the literature, and I was surprised by the lack of documented studies on the use of these devices. There are actually only 9 published studies on acoustic alert. Nearly all of the research was in Europe and North America, and the details on which source broadcasts and how were fairly limited. And after my first trips, I hadn't had much success either, and the results from the literature is fairly mixed. So after the International Back Conference, speaking to other researchers, I wanted to know more. This led to a global survey of Flaquer users. I asked 27 questions related to the user's location, what tools they use, and what ethical and user experience practice. I received 56 responses, which, although quite low compared to many surveys, were particularly niche device. I was fairly pleased. So what did I find out? Well, as expected, although I had respondents from 21 countries, 3 countries represented 50% of all respondents, in the UK, USA, and Belgium. But people had used loads across 34 countries, so there was a bit more of an even spread across these areas, although most of it's in the UK, generally it was in Europe. With a fairly broad range of devices available, the Apodamus Flaquer Bioacoustics 18100 and the Sussex Kloepper, one of the earliest devices defined in the UK by David Hill, were most used. When asked if there was any preference, there was no clear winner, although the ability to use standalone and the use of a tripod were noted. Also, and of particular note, 58% of respondents used the devices for survey work. Just 10% were using them to actually test these devices, and a third of users were using to catch particularly rare or elusive species. The practical setup of lures was done in a myriad of ways. From as expected on a tripod next to the trap, to in the trap, underneath the trap, on top of the trap, and even placed at a distance from the trap. Now, lures have been used to catch a broad variety of species, but generally Australian busy, Isis vexini, and other Bioacoustics species were targeted most often. And a range of calls were used to catch them, but generally it was these 3 same species calls that were used most. Although this doesn't necessarily mean it was the same species being caught that was being broadcast. And you can see from this plot a large range of calls that were used, with 61% of respondents using a mixed combination of calls. You can also see the type of calls and also the source of the call. Although not always the same species calls used, 69% of users use the back calls from the local region, the others being foreign calls. Social calls appear to be used most, with 43% of users using these, but just one person used the stress call. Calls for either direct recordings, 45%, synthesized calls, 29%, or both, 25%. Interestingly, Pipistrelle and Fusi calls seem to work regardless of the target species or even the region, with reports of them working in India. Of slight concern, when asked if users had included broadcast call information in published studies, 75% said they had not. Also, when asked if there were any ethical concerns with using lures, 54% thought there were, and 22% were unsure. Now, these related to the concern that they shouldn't be used near roosts, that we don't have any standardized methods, stress calls shouldn't be used, and that we have a general lack of understanding surrounding these devices. In general, though, 76% of users said they had a positive experience with using lures, and 81% would use one again. However, 23% of users said they did experience unexpected results. These are related to a male sex bias, only catching juveniles, only certain species are responsive, but also that some species are only catchable with the use of a lure. So, what does all this mean? Well, over the last decade, these devices have become commercially available from between $600 to $2,000 depending on the device. So, on the premise, these devices increase capture rates of bats. Now, whilst this can be true, it is apparent that this may not always be the case. With such variation in deployment methods, suggested and used broadcast calls, a lack of standardization or guidelines, and conflicting setup suggestions from manufacturers, using lures can be difficult to navigate. Now, although it's been suggested that some devices are better than others in certain scenarios, this is generally anecdotal, and there's no published comparison available yet. It really depends on the intended use and many other factors that change the effectiveness of these devices. For example, the background bat activity when you deploy these devices can change how it works, actually altering the perceived competition and food availability to the bats. It also depends on the target species. Now, with many people using these devices for survey work, there is concern that this may not be appropriate, as we don't fully understand how these devices change the natural assemblage of bats, overrepresenting some species and underrepresenting others. Generally, it's considered the best way to use these devices is for a particular rare or elusive species. Now, a lack of detail of broadcast rules in publications limits our understanding of what works and what didn't. And it's important we document these for future research. Also, the justification as to why some tools were used is limited, and often it appears semi-random. Typically, there are clearly concerns, and it's great to see that mat researchers are aware of these issues and trying to avoid certain scenarios. As these devices become more available, it's really important that we increase research and understand how they affect the target species and the local assemblage. And perhaps limit use until we really fully understand what's going on. To assist this, manufacturers could begin to collate user experiences on using these devices. Overall, it is clear there is a need for other international organizations to provide guidelines and standardized methods on how to use these devices. Not only will this ensure ethical use, but assist best practice, and also streamline research across the respective country or region. At present, the only organizations that provide such guidelines are Bat Conservation Trust and Natural England, both based in the UK. These already address many of the concerns brought to light by this survey. Now, this has been a relatively small snapshot of my thesis research, so I urge you to ask questions if you have any. I am intending to embark on a PhD, which will hopefully include some more low work, and I do have plans to test them further here in New Zealand. Sam Freeze and I have also set up an online Bat Learners forum, so I urge you to join that and the community of users so we can stimulate some discussions and share experience of using learning. Now, me and you,